we just have 2 items on our agenda today, so. Oh, it's 9/11 today.
Yeah.
I watched, it was on, I think it was 60 Minutes last Sunday that they did a special on 9/11 with just specifically the firefighters. It's very, very touching. Got 1 more minute.
I did a race around the Pentagon the year after, and nobody did that race for time. Everybody just stopped where they had done the repairs, where the plane had crashed into, and not a dry eye. It was.
I can imagine. They're doing, they do at Red Rocks, the firefighters, go do the stairs. So they're, I think they do that at 8 o'clock this morning. And I know that because my hairdresser who did my hair yesterday, can you tell, told me she was doing it today. Okay, looks like it is 8:30. Do we have Councilmember Sundberg and Councilmember Gardner on? Not yet.
Morning.
Okay. Are you there? Okay. Didn't want to start without you.
Thank you.
And I don't know about Councilmember Gardner. We'll go ahead and get started. So anyway, thank you everyone for joining us for the Planning and Economic Development Policy Committee. And on this day of September 11th, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the minutes.
I approve the minutes.
Great. Thank you. I do too. So we've got that moving forward. And we'll start with our first item, which is development review updates.
So this is Jane Rusted, the Director of Planning and Business Development. I am being joined by Jacob Cox, Director of Development Services. I saw him on there.
I'm here. Good morning.
And he will share the presentation and kick us off. We also have with us Vern Adams, who may speak a little, and Nicole Ankeny, because yeah, there we go. Jacob, you want to kick us off?
Yes. Everybody seeing that okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good morning, everybody. Jacob Cox, Director of Development Services. So we'll have a bit of a tag team presentation here this morning. Gina and I take the bulk of it, but want to give you kind of through Q2, third quarter update here for development review. We're going to go over slides here. We're going to go over what we're calling building Aurora together, the collaborative approach, kind of building that culture of collaboration between the staff doing development review and the development community. We'll talk about some of the stakeholder engagement outreach we've done in recent months and over the last year. We'll go over the report card, the workload metrics that you're all used to seeing, the department initiative updates, and then process improvement initiative updates that we've been working on. So to kind of kick it off, these are the 4 departments, Janine and I representing the 2 up there at the top, Planning, Business Development, Development Services, and then we've got Parks and Open Space, Nicole, the primary representative there on the development review side, and then Aurora Water, drainage utility reviews over in Aurora Water. And so we've been working through lots of cross-training, cultural building with the development review team over the year. This is a recent meeting we did last month with the managers are running divisional meetings with all the departments and divisions involved in development review. And so we're getting together and doing cross-training between what each of the groups does. The big idea being that breaking down those silos, because that's really going to help the development process based on the feedback we're hearing from the development community. So we think these are going really well. And then that can then translate into how they're approaching their actual projects that are coming in the door and being reviewed.
And Jacob,
Yep.
Actually, one thing on that, and part of it is building that teamwork, but also understanding the why. For visionary planners, sometimes it's hard to hear an engineer say something that may block the vision, but when you understand each other, you start to work and collaborate more. So this is a really great thing that the managers took on themselves.
That's right. And the other thing that we're doing, this is with the managers and the staff, and then we've got a department leadership meeting that we do every 2 weeks with all the directors and the managers of each division and department. And we work out, issues between departments and talk about these initiatives and what can we do and what feedback we're hearing from developers. And that's the group that is going out and meeting with developers on a regular basis. That's the Development Review Advisory Board, JTF, HBA, ADC. We meet with developers every week. So Janine, I'll let you kick this off. These are our department initiatives and updates, things that we're working on, and we'll get in towards the end of the presentation towards the process improvement initiatives. But if you want to maybe start with the UDO and housing analysis.
So UDO, there's a few things going on with that. One are the process updates, so more on that. But the second one, your second agenda item today, is looking at housing. And it was important to take a holistic look at housing versus doing one-off amendments. One, it's easier for you council seeing the bigger picture and getting it all at once. But two, we need more housing. So being able to take a step back, look at the code, talk to developers. Again, we've done the roundtables. As we develop code amendments, we'll go through the JTF, DRAB JTF, PED process. Of course, the Connecting Aurora, we're a year into the city's first multimodal transportation master plan. We've done extensive outreach this summer with that and have some really good feedback from our businesses and our residents on what they want to see for the future of our transportation. With the process improvements, instead of making code changes and hoping they work, in working with developers, we have identified pilot projects. So you're going to hear about the neighborhood plan, which is, I won't say replacing the site plans, but it's something I said when I came in. We need to make sure we're getting the right amount of information at the right stage in the process. So we have a few pilots ongoing that we want to get through the process before we bring you code amendments. And then Jacob.
Yep. So we'll talk a little bit more detail about that neighborhood plan and what that is. A lot of jurisdictions do what we call a preliminary plat. We actually have that in our code today. And so we'll go over that a little bit further down the presentation here with some graphics. So drainage updates, we've been working with our colleagues in Aurora Water. Vern's on here today. And we identified, one of the pinch points that we've heard over the last couple of years was the preliminary drainage report. And so we'll talk about that a little bit in conjunction with the neighborhood plan. But the idea being that we were hearing from the development community that they felt that middle point in the drainage process, so typically you have a master plan and then the preliminary drainage report would come in with the site plan and then the final drainage is at civils. So we were getting a lot of complaints that felt like a duplicative process. So we're looking at if we have that level of compliance criteria that can be reviewed to at that master plan level, then can we bypass that process and really focus on that final drainage and do more of a compliance analysis? So that's what our friends in Aurora Water have been working with us on. And so I really think that's going to help not only with the neighborhood plan, but really across the board with the process improvements. PROS is working on a parks manual update now. That's looking at kind of the whole manual, but also how we approach land dedication. That's something that we hear from developers a lot. The city engineer and our engineering review group in collaboration with the other departments has been working on the roadway manual updates. And this is what I would call more of the low-hanging fruit items. We're going to do a broader overhaul of that likely when Connecting Aurora completes and we can do a holistic look between the UDO and the roadway manual. But this is also identifying some issues that we hear from developers that were efficiency updates that needed to be made. So largely reformatting that manual so it's easier to read, easier to follow. Lots of fiber and small cell updates. We're very busy with fiber. We're getting a lot of pressure for looking at additional technology options. So we're actually going to take an update to TAPS, I believe, next week on the fiber front. And so that'll have some updates compared to what was there last year. Traffic updates, one of the things from a development review standpoint on the traffic side is that previously the traffic inside of Public Works was doing double duty on development review and some of the capital related functions of traffic. And so now we have a dedicated team inside of the traffic division on the engineering review side in my group that is actually only doing development review, and that's really helping with some of the efficiencies. Some of the metrics are getting a lot better because of that, and so I think that's been a massive improvement in terms of how we review for traffic on development. Building and public improvements, that's part of the new department, and so we'll go over some of the metrics and scorecard information there. But building, numbers are very strong on the building side. ODA, we're always looking at improvements and efficiencies around pre-application meetings. We're very busy on those. We'll go over those metrics here shortly. We're seeing a lot of pre-apps coming in the door. We're over our numbers that we were at last year. Office of Process Improvement is the group that's working on the Amanda updates, and so they've done a great job over the last year rolling out lots of different folders, and so they're going to start getting into the development space here shortly, starting out with the DA here later this month. And then, with all of this in mind, we want to do better stakeholder engagement. So we've been very mindful of engaging our stakeholders. We don't want to roll anything out that's not going to work for the development community, and so we're actively working with stakeholder groups. So to get into the report card here on metrics, so you've got 2024 to 23 comparison there in terms of the percentages, and then so kind of looking at those pre-application meetings, as I mentioned, we're 32% up. That's a strong indicator across the board on what we're going to see on development applications, and so up 32% from last year. Last year was a busy year, and we'll get into this as we look at the building numbers in particular. But 2023, largely, we were seeing a lot of the Eastern development being infrastructure. Developers wanting to get into the ground with civil plans, getting infrastructure, roads, water lines out there so they could be prepared for home builders to come in and go vertical. And you're absolutely seeing that now. And so we're seeing pre-application meetings being very stable across the board. It's all different sectors, types of projects that are coming in. It's not just single family or multifamily. It's small commercial sites. It's large commercial users. It's ADC projects. So really strong on the pre-app front. And then with that, I'll let Janine talk about DAs, and then we'll go into engineering.
So we are improving on our DAs, and remember that even though it lives in planning, that this is a multi-departmental effort. It involves engineering, transportation. From the planning perspective, you'll hear later, one of our challenges has been staffing. We were fully staffed for 2 weeks, and we're down a few positions again, so that is still happening. But thankfully, we've had some good candidates. We're looking forward to getting fully staffed. And with things changing, what we're constantly doing is looking at workloads, making sure that if someone seems to be falling behind, that we try to move something off their plate to someone who might have a little more bandwidth so that we can keep the numbers up. And with that long list that you saw on the previous slide of everything we're doing between our departments, we are still trying to prioritize the development review because that's really what's getting things in the ground. But it is a challenge on the staffing side. Jacob?
Absolutely. Thank you. So looking at some of the civil metrics here, drainage or raw water, but those are looking a lot better. That's been an overwhelming component of our review process for a while in terms of the volume and the workload and the complexity of those reviews. And so, as I mentioned, trying to kind of figure out some efficiencies with the PDR to final drainage, you're starting to see the numbers of those come in the door because we are trying to consolidate that more into the final. If we've got master plans, for example, which we have for the most part, most of the greenfield areas do have a master plan, master drainage, master utilities. So we've got those compliance documents that we can kind of use as guidelines. That's, I think, really going to help as we move forward. Civil plans, we're looking good there. They're up 11%, 90%. That's a number that we've really been working on over the last year to 2 years, particularly coming out of the red tape era. And so, really, really good there. The other thing to note is that the volume of work is also different because of the changing face of the development. These projects in the Northeast and the 470 corridor are just a lot larger than they were 10 years ago. And so these projects are highly complex, very large. We'll get into a little bit as well later in the presentation about some civil plan timeline updates. That's an area of improvement that we needed to make for the development community in terms of the consolidation of those timelines and allowing for more options. Easements and license agreements. As you recall, last year we were talking about, and we've got a slide with some of those initiatives, but the easement process, that number, it's down 47% in terms of the volume. That's intentional because we've got a terms and conditions document now where we're trying to consolidate a lot of those separate document easements that were coming in. We'd like those to be done either on the subdivision plat, ideally, but if we've got a plat and a developer's coming in and that plat is really just the lot and block, and we need to do separate documents, we've got a dedicatory map process now. So it's really eliminating a lot of the workload that was coming in separate applications and trying to do it in a more consolidated approach, particularly for bigger projects. I'll use Port Colorado as an example. It's a large project. They were coming in and not necessarily subdividing, but they wanted to get infrastructure in the ground. And so we were doing hundreds of easement applications. Now we've consolidated that down into a single map where we can kind of identify those easements in a consolidated manner. So that's really intentional in terms of us working through some efficiencies there. And the development community has been engaged in helping us to get to that point.
Jacob, Chair Bergan has a question.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just, on your yearly historical average, because I'm looking at the civil plans, you've got 90%, 91, 90, 90 with a 1% variance from the year before. So when you say is that like many years average? Maybe I missed it when you said it before.
Yeah, that is kind of our average looking back several years.
Several years. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. So I'll kind of go into the building division report card here. So commercial buildings, and we would loop in those large commercial buildings. Those are down. However, we have a lot of those projects in the hopper right now that are some point in the process, either in the development application, nearing permits middle stage. So I do anticipate that number is going to go up by the end of the year. But single family dwellings, those are up 95% to last year. So that's been a huge shift. That, as I mentioned, I think last year we were kind of feeling that was going to happen as we were working through all these infrastructure sets with the developers in the Northeast area in particular. But that's good to see in terms of 1,122 single family dwellings, and this goes through about July in terms of these numbers. So that's going to go up as we show you the end of year numbers here in the next few months. Multifamily dwellings, those are up 12%. We do have a lot of those projects in the pipeline as well, and so I anticipate a lot of these numbers will be above 2023 as we get to the end of the year. But again, almost 11,000 permits issued thus far. They're up 34%. The revenues are really strong. We're up 17% overall. We've done over 67,000 inspections this year. So that number is really off the charts here in terms of what we're seeing. And then one of the metrics I want to point out from the call center on the building division and the permit staff, calls answered within 45 seconds, 96%. That's 39,000 calls as of July. So huge volume of work, and that team does an amazing job customer service wise. So this is a prior slide. I just want to kind of walk through this as we get into the initiatives, city requirements. So this is where Janine and I and the rest of the team are kind of looking at where are areas of improvement. So we talked about that level of detail. Janine mentioned on the master plan, the site plan component. That's kind of where we started to go with the neighborhood plan we're going to discuss. Civil plans, drainage, and pros. We really need quality plan submittals, and that's something we're working with the development community on. This is not just a one-way street with the city. We need a partnership, we need collaboration, and we need quality documents coming in the door so that we can get those through our system and approved. We're multiple rounds of review. Part of the issue driving that is if the developers their consultants are not picking up comments, and so we need to make sure that we're not having repeat comments, that also design changes mid-review, those are challenges for the team. So we're working through some of those. We still need to allow nimbleness and flexibility in meeting those market demands, and so that's all about that collaboration with the development community. We had identified 20-year-old timelines and process. It's not a one-size-fits-all. I think we had that approach 10 years ago. And so we're really trying to shift to be a little bit more nimble in terms of the types and contexts of the projects that are coming in the door. I see Councilmember Gardner, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I want to maybe a comment / could lead into a question, I guess. But you said that the multiple rounds of review are due to consultants missed or repeat comments. And, that might be true in some cases, but also some of the feedback that I've heard are that new comments come up after the first round that were identified that should have been identified on the first round, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so I don't think it's 100% on the consultant or the developer responsibility. And so I guess, are we tracking that, or is there a way to track that, or things that
Yeah.
should have been picked up in review in the first hand but weren't? Because I don't
Yes.
think it's just the consultant's problem.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I'm not trying to throw that all on the consultant, but yeah, you're absolutely right. We are working towards that, and that is something we're trying to implement better technologies to help us track those things. We need to be reviewing to the comments that were made previously. If nothing changed, we should not be adding late comments, for example, late stages. You know, one area we've really been focused on with our leadership group is to make sure that those supervisors are getting in with those plan reviewers early on, not doing it late in the game, because we don't want to have a supervisor or manager jump in. We're supposed to be signing documents and we're rejecting them because we found something late stages. So that is not something any of us want to see. But you're absolutely right. This is a two-way street, as I mentioned, and we are doing a lot of work on our side to make sure that we try and minimize that happening.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before I move on here? Janine, anything you wanted to add here on this slide?
No, you answered that question perfectly, that this is a partnership, and we acknowledge and recognize our room for improvement, but we're asking the developers to help us in that too, so that we're all working more efficiently. As much as we don't want to give new comments, it's nice when they say, hey, we've changed something, that, and especially if it's a significant change. So it's that collaboration. We'll have to show Councilmember Gardner the first slide again, or that second slide, second or third.
So just go over kind of some of the prior initiatives. We've gone through this list before, but I wanted to just provide a brief update before we get into some of the new initiatives. So ongoing, code guidance, reference manual updates, as we identify and work through some of these issues, we're having to look at the UDO, roadway specs, drainage, parks and open space, real property items such as that license agreement and terms and conditions and dedicatory map document. We did implement those. You're starting to see that really pay dividends, I think, on how efficient we can review plats and easements and license agreement. That was a huge workload effort, and that was causing a lot of pinch points in the system. So we've worked through some of those refinements. Amanda software upgrades. This is citywide, not just development, but we're getting into those development phases now as we get into the end of the year here. And that also is extremely important, because we can't actually implement a lot of the things we're talking about without the system being able to handle it. And so as we work through some of these pilots, we're identifying also technology pinch points, and it's enabling us to help work with our team on the programming of Amanda. As we've been talking about ongoing, and this is going to be a constant culture of process improvement, but performance and customer service, making sure that cross-departmental quarterly meeting, that's all about breaking down those silos, but also customer service with development community, their consultants. We've got great relationships with the development community. We want to maintain that, and we want to make sure that we're available and working through those issues. Development is challenging, and so we're here to meet those demands. And I think we really pride ourselves in being one of the more collaborative organizations that developers are going to deal with. Councilmember Gardner.
Yeah, just a question on that last box about performance and customer service. Do you maintain like metrics for tracking how quickly things are moving through, and like on an individual plan reviewer basis, just to identify, do we have an issue with somebody specific, or like things like that? I guess I'm just curious, like what kind of metrics exist?
We do, and we're working. That's going to be part of some of the updates of the system, but we actually do. So the management team does actually pull metrics. We have the ability to pull metrics per reviewer, per division. So we are constantly looking at that. That report card that we went over, that's kind of high level development applications, civil plans, but we can go down and we do absolutely review to those metrics. So in terms of our performance reviews for employees, we're looking at those metrics as we're doing those. And so we are identifying if there's an issue. Also, is there a workload imbalance? Because that happens. You get a strong reviewer, and all of a sudden they get all the projects, and that's unsustainable. So it's also about retaining our employees and retaining our strong employees that are getting that heavy workload. But yeah, we're absolutely doing that.
Yeah,
yep,
and
definitely.
For planning and business development, I go over our metrics for our current planner development case managers monthly with Brandon Camerata, our manager, and his supervisors. And also what was implemented, one thing implemented from council is a twice-a-year bonus system. So looking at those metrics and who is really going above and beyond.
Yep, that's a great point, Janine, and that was something that thank you to council who recommended that resolution. And so that's really helped us, I think, to help build the rapport and the team dynamic there. And we have a good set of parameters. We have kind of based on the division and what each work group does, but we just issued the last one here, I think a month or so ago, in terms of performance bonuses based on metrics and workload. So submittal requirement. Oh yeah,
yeah.
go ahead, Councilmember, sorry.
Sorry, my hand went up and then down. Just on the staffing, and I know we've talked about this in the past, but are you able to use temporary employees, contract labor for any of the, these initiatives at all?
We do have some contractors, but what we've had to do in recent years was bring on third-party consultants to help us. We've got that. Planning has that for landscaping, for example. That was a heavy volume workload item for them. Drainage, Aurora Water does the same for drainage. We've got that on land services, on some of those easement license agreement reviews, easement plat reviews, and then civil. And so we're also trying to find that right balance of FTEs, and so dissipate some of those third parties to the right level of FTEs for sustainable capacity for the team, and not heavy reliance on third parties. But we are doing that, but we're also trying to find a good steady state with existing staffing and new staffing.
Part of wanting to reduce some of the reliance on consultants is the consistency factor. That, at least what I'm seeing is staff is more invested in looking. It's not just get your billable hours, it's building that culture, and it is catching on.
Yeah, because one of the areas also that we hear on these big projects, it's hard on staff, and it's also hard on the developers and the consultants if you have a constantly evolving door of staff working on your project. So we want to build teams on these projects, especially long-ranging projects. And so we do most of the large projects around the city. We're doing regular meetings, whether it's biweekly, monthly. We're meeting with those teams constantly, and we have kind of a team approach from all of the different divisions that are working on it. So you have a consistent set of perspectives on that project, and it's not shifting. And so that's something we're trying to get to. It's absolutely something we've heard for the last several years from developers. And
you look at the workload that we're seeing with all the different housing initiatives versus what our staffing levels. So obviously, if there's an imbalance, I mean, I'm sure you're coming to city manager and council for any FTE.
We are. You'll see that on the 2025 budget here in the next several weeks. Some key positions we've identified. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then just quickly, submittal requirements. We're auditing that process. This is a lot of what we're talking about here today, but it's that stakeholder discussion, project pilots, as Janine mentioned, trying to find opportunities for enhancement, and not being afraid to try it. We want to try it before we maybe roll something out totally formally and change our code. We want to make sure it works, and if it doesn't work, what do we learn from it? So we're doing that process right now. Reducing the number of rounds of review, comment tracking, as Councilmember Gardner mentioned, we're trying to find a streamlined, predictable approach. We do not want comments coming up at late stages of reviews and having to reject plans. We want to get plans to a point of approval, but they need to meet code and they need to meet our policies and regulations. And so it's that collaboration that we're talking about. And then timelines and clocks, we're looking at those timelines. I'll go over the civil timeline updates here shortly. And then organizational structure, largely it was the Development Services Department that reorganized, but last year also we moved drainage from Public Works over to Aurora Water, and so that's been fully implemented in place, and I think it's helping us to find some efficiencies. So we'll kind of talk about the process initiatives at a high level here. So the neighborhood plan, preliminary plat, we do have a pilot going for ARDA that I'm going to go over at a high level, streamlining that infrastructure site plan to civils for roadway infrastructure, particularly the authority who's delivering those roads in the Northeast right now, and how we can kind of learn and particularly apply that to development moving forward. Those drainage updates, as I mentioned, parks manual updates, and then civil plan timelines. And so to jump in on kind of our current state, to talk about this neighborhood plan, so the master plan process has become very detailed. This is kind of our current state overview, and we were seeing that it was largely an effort to also outline the phasing, obtain lot development approvals, and so master plans, they were also becoming required for small projects and addressing public improvements. Go ahead, Janine. Sorry.
And this is one where I came in, and when seeing the level of detail, While sometimes that's good because that shows you what the development's going to look at, what it also results in is the need for multiple master plan amendments. When you're on a fifth, sixth master plan amendment, especially when these areas, think the Aurora Highlands, get built out over 10, 20 years, we want to make sure we have high enough level of detail and that we're working out the finer grain as you work through the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as we've got on here, the right size and conceptual. We want that to be a high-level guidance document, inclusive of those engineering documents, because the public improvement phasing document, master utility study, master traffic study, master drainage, those all live in that document, and those need to be that guidance, but we don't want to constantly go back and have to amend those documents. We want it to be a guidance document to move forward with those site development applications. So this is our intended current state. This slide is what, the idealized version of this process looks like, and I'll kind of walk you through what the reality is and kind of why we have some pinch points and what we're working with developers. But you've got that master plan, as I mentioned, as that guiding document, and site plan and plats traditionally come in together that's the development application at the site level that would come in for identifying the detail, the landscaping, the network, and then the final subdivision plat would typically come in concurrent with that, and that would then get to a milestone in order to allow civil plans to move forward. That also has the preliminary drainage report in there, and the civils would have the final. What our process actually looks like is something more like this. You have these orange boxes here. I'm sorry, the master drainage report, master traffic study, public improvements document, and then that vicious cycle of changes that occurs between site back to master plan. I think most of the master plans we see, as Janine mentioned, oftentimes have amendments to them. And so we're trying to reduce that. That's going to have some efficiencies to it. We also see site plans being broken out from infrastructure site plans where developers want to come in and build those district roads, for example. And so both of those document sets have their own drainage reports, their own traffic studies, and then the plat and the right-of-way potentially in separate documents. And so it spawns this entire process of multiple iterations, multiple filings. And so we're trying to find some efficiencies with that. And so the idea of the neighborhood plan is really to consolidate some of this so that you've got one overarching on a large residential. I'll use the Aurora Highlands, for example, a large residential filing where a developer wants to come in and lot out the circulation network, the roadway network, and the lotting for 300 to 500 lots. We can do a consolidated development application for that, is what we're anticipating with this pilot, and then do a single drainage analysis that's looking at that master and not have 3 or 4 different development applications within that. That then allows them to move forward with civils, and they can phase the civils as they like to based on the public improvements requirements, what they're trying to go vertical with. But we're trying to find some efficiency here between master plan and civil so that we can get them to lots and executed lots more quickly to getting to building permits. And so that's something we're really working through. Anything you want to add, Janine, on the neighborhood plan?
No.
So talk a little bit about the civil timeline updates. This is our proposed consolidated timeline. What this looks like in our system is actually about 12 of these columns. So we're trying to find some efficiencies around that. We did a lot of analysis. We met with developers and their engineers about kind of some of the timelines. There was a lack of transparency on the larger sets. We ran into an issue that 10 years ago, we weren't seeing sets that were, for the most part, over about 80 sheets. And so that's what lived in our development handbook for years. And so we identified that, we had these programmed in the system in terms of going up to 200 sheets, 350 plus. We don't see a lot over 350, but for the most part, most of the civil sets that come in the door today are 100 to 200 sheets. And so that column right now, we're actually reducing the timeline with this proposal. And so that's really going to find some efficiencies there. We're also looking at maybe adding a version for much smaller stuff. If we need just ADA compliance updates around an infill site, we want to have a smaller, tighter timeline. The other thing we're really mindful of is trying to get commercial projects. I'll use the Food Bank of the Rockies Majestic Commerce Center project as an example. We're trying to find efficiencies around that to make sure that we can be really competitive with the market. So as we're working through all these initiatives, we're looking at that, trying to find efficiencies with commercial projects, working with the ADC on that as well. And so that Food Bank project is really the model to us on how that process can work. And that was a collaboration, very, very effective review process. I think we got that done in 4 months total from development application to permit. But this is what we've vetted with our team, and then we're doing stakeholder engagement right now on that. But that's our civil plan update. And so where we're at is the process details. We're looking at those code, Amanda, manual changes now. We're collecting feedback. We just completed a couple roundtable meetings in the last couple weeks with the development community. And so we're kind of in that pilot testing phase right now, including staff education, training, looking at options, looking at potential code issues that we might run into with some of these ideas. But it's a constant cycle of procuring feedback and testing and learning from that. And then implementation, we're looking at trying to adopt some of these processes, set a release date, go live, and hopefully early in the year. A lot of that will hinge on the Amanda updates as well. So we're working through that over the next few months. But that's where we're at. And so with that, I'll let Janine close out if she has anything. Otherwise, we'll take some questions.
No, just a thanks to all the partners in this, our internal, we have a great internal team. I think that just seeing the improvements, how we're working together, but our external partners, because again, we can think of this and come up with the processes, but without them willing to discuss it with us, teach us in some areas, and then try it out. It's a good way to go forward. And Councilmember Gardner.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Councilmember
Yeah.
Gardner.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the presentation, and I think there's a lot of good initiatives going on. So one kind of question or maybe suggestion that I had, and this is a small thing, but I think it kind of speaks to the process improvement, continuous process improvement, and just kind of the culture in general. Some of the feedback I hear from developers sometimes is, we want to see the process better. And my response is always, okay, well, tell me what policy change, because I'm a policymaker, what policy change can I make to make the process better? I can't pass an ordinance that just says the process has to be better. Like, it has to be something specific. And so, some of that responsibility is on the developers to make those recommendations, but also I'm curious, or maybe a suggestion, because the further away you are from something, the less you kind of know how the details work, the nitty gritty works, the common problems that come up. And so one recommendation or suggestion is coming up with some type of program where plans reviewers can make recommendations for process improvements, efficiency improvements, even policy changes if they're seeing things that commonly trip up the process. I just, we do something similar, kind of putting on my work hat, something similar with trash truck drivers, where they can submit recommendations for efficiencies. And if one of those ideas is implemented, there's a cash bonus back to them, basically. And so, those frontline folks are really going to be the best source of recommendations for process and efficiency improvements. And so, maybe just a thought or a recommendation, and that otherwise really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you. That's a great recommendation. And yeah, we're absolutely, we need to learn from the folks that are doing this work day in and day out. And so I think that's a very good recommendation.
And
oh, go ahead.
I say, and the bi-monthly meetings we have internally, that's with right now the managers, some supervisors, but to watch folks who are doing the work build off each other. When someone brings something up and, well, that may work, but then we have these other things. So when you get everybody in a room together doing that, the energy, it's great.
We absolutely want to empower employees to be able to make those suggestions, because they know what those pinch points are.
Councilmember Gardner's suggestion of a cash bonus for an idea that gets implemented. Councilmember Sundberg, do you have a question or comment? You're muted.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for the presentation. I don't have any questions.
Okay. I think
in our bonus system, sorry, Chair Bergan, I think in our bonus system, one thing in planning we looked at was innovation, because that's one of my favorite words. And we do want people to come up with a better way to do things. Makes their jobs easier too.
We do have innovation as a parameter.
Yep, across the board.
Yep.
Okay, well, I had a question, and it was specific to I know we're having discussions on UDO changes and so forth, that the low hanging fruit that we're working on to bring to council. But on the tree lawns, I forget what they're called now. there's another word for another, what do you call the tree lawns now?
The curbside landscape area.
Oh, yeah, curbside. I know we had some issues with the turf ordinance and so forth. Is that part of where one of the updates I didn't know where it fit in the updates. Was that part of water or?
That was taken care of. I think it was either earlier this year or last year. So we did amend the UDO to catch up with the waters, what they've done with.
Okay, I thought I talked to Marshall Brown and there were still some issues on that, but maybe it was just overall landscaping that
I mean, we're
they
also
still
working
had
through
to.
the street trees.
Yeah, we're working through street trees, and that's a multi-department. We should have had that on the slide. Collaboration.
Yeah.
That's got planning, pros, traffic engineering.
Okay, yeah, that's what it was. Okay, that I just remembered there was something that we were still working on. And I think that was all I had. I really appreciate all the work. I know, you put it into one presentation and I know it took a lot of time, just this entire year of having to have these meetings and collaboration with the development community as well as with staff. And you guys have done a really good job, and I really appreciate it. I know our other committee members also appreciate all your work. So thank you.
We appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the housing UDO analysis update.
Thank you. And again, Janine Rustad, Director of Planning and Business Development, getting some notes up here. I know this is small, it is in your packet, but since the August presentation, and thank you, Steve Timms, for filling in and presenting last month. That's when I was in Boston for exploring how other cities do things. But since the last meeting, we have gathered information from consultants and developers, or developers and their consultants. We are still gathering information because one consultant gave us a draft code that they think is a good example. Unfortunately, it wasn't adopted by that jurisdiction, but it was 650 pages. So they asked for a little additional time to cull out what could be applicable in Aurora. And we said, absolutely, take the time you need versus us trying to decipher 650 pages. We've taken the ideas that have been generated and put it into the spreadsheet that's in your packet. That's organized by the low-hanging fruit, state mandate, and then more phase 2, what we'll look to get into next year, that are going to take some more time to discuss. So today I'm going to focus on these top 2 tiers. With the state mandates, we know that some of these are not going to be popular, but it was a thou shalt, so we are going to bring them forward. There's going to be 2 separate bills, probably by the end of this year. One is the accessory dwelling units. Lena McClelland, our counsel for the department, is working on drafting the amendments for that. We are also coordinating with Housing and Community Services on that, but also on the one that was a bill that was effective immediately, which was removing the restriction on the number of occupants within a dwelling unit, except for you can restrict if it's based on health or safety. So those will be coming forward as a separate package. That is intentional. We know they're controversial, and we don't want them to hold up any of the low-hanging fruit that will have an impact on getting houses built in Aurora. So looking at this top category, and sorry if I'm looking at my big screen, what we've decided is this one, the developer recommended motor courts, allowing duplexes on motor courts. We are starting to draft that already, and it is our hope to bring that forward by the year end. We are also going to look at small lot screen courts. That might be more next year that we bring something forward, because it ties in with the last one on this list, the small lot definition. Small lots do help us get more houses at a lower price. With the landscape adjustments, we do have an alternative compliance in code right now. So we're starting to look at how we can use that more so as to avoid the need for adjustments. Again, that's going to save developers some time. And when you look at what goes into the cost of housing, sometimes the approval process can add cost. We've heard from one of our developers that about their holding costs. So trying again to get more efficiency. When we sat down as staff at the beginning of the month and looked at this list, we saw a lot had to do with parking. So in October, we're going to hold another roundtable with developers to discuss the various issues on parking, whether it's reducing the number of garage spaces. When you look at duplexes or the duplexes on motor courts, green courts, while those allow more housing to be built, if you also are reducing parking, it puts a strain on the street because with those alleys that you use to get to your garages, you have breaks, so you don't have the on-street parking. So we want to make sure, again, as I said from the beginning of this process, it's not just about building houses, it's building community. And Councilmember Bergan, you and I have discussed if we reduce parking too much, it's guaranteed, especially Councilmember Sundberg with the ward that's being developed the fastest, you're going to get a lot of calls. So we want to make sure that we're creating the community, having the connectivity, having space for your friends to come over for dinner and park. So that's what we're looking at right now, one additional roundtable. However, as we draft the code amendments, we will go to DRAB, then JTF, and come back to PED as we bring things through the process. Questions?
Councilmember Gardner or Councilmember Sundberg?
No questions yet.
Okay, sounds like we're good.
All right, thank you.
Oh, I see someone has a question.
Oh, it looks like Brad Pierce.
Yeah, thanks for recognizing me. I'm speaking as a private citizen now and not any other capacity, but lower down on this list, Janine, is the page 2 items, potential staff led. I'll take you back in time a little bit. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Councilmember Ingrid Lindemann at the time was a sponsor of the original masonry ordinance. So this particular item says feasibility of potential changes in percent of masonry. I just want to point that out, that the masonry ordinance came in probably 20 years ago or more, and it's been modified, of course, over time. I just want to ask that you be careful about the masonry requirements because if I remember correctly, the amount of masonry can be reduced if the developer has certain architectural features, which I think is okay. But I just want to bring it up that the masonry ordinance has been around and then modified. I just want to be careful, ask you to be careful on when you do with masonry requirements.
We are working with a developer right now on a pilot because you can have good architecture without masonry and you can have bad architecture with a 15-20% masonry requirement, which I call the façadomy. They slap a little fake brick on the front and it doesn't necessarily look good. And part of this is getting up to durability. That's one thing we want to protect. We don't want the type of materials that in our weather conditions are going to deteriorate within 5, 10, 15 years. And again, building community, look run down and tired.
And I'll add to that, Brad, because I remember it had been reduced to the whatever 15% from what it was originally. And you know, when it first came in, and I wasn't on council when that was first made a requirement, but a lot of our housing started looking exactly the same, cookie cutter, and very, very plain, just siding. And so I think it was an attempt to upgrade communities and aesthetically. And I mean, I represent Southeast Aurora. We have really nice looking housing that is very appealing. So I would also caution just to balance it if we're going to reduce the masonry, that there are other things to make it look nice and not, a lot of it. My family's in Colorado Springs. A lot of the housing is just, you just see rows and rows from the street that are flat and just siding, and then the siding falls apart too. So yeah, I'm a big fan of making sure things last from a durability perspective, but that they, do give an element to make a neighborhood look nice.
Absolutely. And that's why the developer we're working with is award-winning, and they want to build a good community that has that longevity and will have their name on it for decades to come.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions from our committee members? No? Okay. Thank you for that presentation. And I think that is it on our agenda items, other than reports. I don't see anybody that has a report from our different committees, and unless I'm missing one. No? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Sundberg.
I hope I'm not interrupting too soon, but I have a question. If there are no presentations?
Go ahead.
Further? Okay. This might be for Jacob and Janine. I want to bring up Gun Club Road and request a future presentation on Gun Club Road. It's this seemingly amorphous, hot potato, finger pointing, piecemeal thing that nobody really wants to say is going to happen segmentally. Okay, yes, it's 3 different jurisdictions, right? And it seems as if it's going to be this undulating in and out thing down the road. And if, maybe we even have developers that are shirking their responsibility in certain ways, and to build out certain areas. And that's another story, but I would not mind seeing and last year it was under study, right? It was under this study. And then then we could avoid it, right? Well, what's the study? What are the results? And what does it look like from section to section, jurisdiction to jurisdiction, maybe even developer to developer, or unsold piece of land to sold piece of land? What are the realistic build outs in timeframes? Because I got some frustrated people out here wondering what's going to happen, and there's a lot of finger pointing going on. Could we have a presentation that really intentionally delves into what we want this thing to look like and holding people accountable, rather than just this future thing that's going to happen when somebody develops something?
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I'm on the TAPS committee, which is Transportation, Airports and Public Works. So it has been presented in the past, and updates will come to that committee. But I guess.
But I've seen, it's not to interrupt you, I apologize. I've seen it from Quincy south. Are you talking about Quincy all the way down to?
No, I was going to say, I understand that you want the whole segment, because we have Saria down south that has a responsibility for Gun Club as well. I guess I'm asking if that's supposed to be in the Transportation Committee, or is that supposed to be in Planning and Economic Development? I guess the tie that you're making, which I understand, is the tie to housing, obviously, and our planning and economic development. So maybe Laura, I know it normally goes to Transportation Committee, but do you see a way to bring it forward from what Councilmember Sundberg saying? Obviously his area has a different, situation with it being a highway, a state highway, versus the other half is not a state highway.
The whole stretch is a state highway. But we are having internal conversations, Councilmember Sundberg, in response to the frustration and the concerns you've expressed about the piecemeal responsibilities, as you've referenced, for the segment that falls within your ward. So I think it's appropriate, Chair Bergan. We can certainly bring it back here
Okay.
Under the auspice of, development review. There's a lot of developer responsibility for that area and can bring it back here for discussion.
Yeah, and I think to his point, if we do it with that developer, kind of responsibility,
Yeah.
if we could, I don't know if they could do a little map and just show which missing segments or what segments are developer responsibility, what segments are potentially part of Syria or other authorities.
Absolutely. Yes.
And for example, I think of Curtis Gardner because, right adjacent to Dad's landfill, I believe that is Arapahoe County, sandwiched in between Dad's and the solar project that's going in next to the Plains Conservation Center. Why isn't that built out? And who's responsible for that, for example? And that's a rough piece of road, by the way. There's some monster potholes in there that I don't think anybody's monitoring that will eat vehicles on the side of the road. That's a separate topic, but just even the quality of the road as it exists now is seems like it's unmonitored.
Yep. We'll have the team start looking at that. I think we can absolutely pull together an exhibit showing those responsibilities, showing those gaps. We're very aware of the issues out here. Thank you.
And I just I don't want to step on the chair of transportation's toes, because sometimes, people will be, that's part of my committee and why is it going to another committee? So I just wanted to make sure that we're good with bringing it to PEDs, and it makes sense from a developer perspective. Real quick, it was not in our backup, the first presentation that Janine and Jacob gave. Can we
Yes.
get that presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
I will email that out following this meeting.
Okay, very good. All right, well, anything else from the committee? No? Okay, well, we appreciate all the work that you guys have done for us, and we look like we're really making a lot of improvements. I know I am hearing some good comments from developers on the progress, so want to thank all the staff for that. And with that, we will end the meeting, and our next one is October 9th. So have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.